Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined by Dave tonight as we review the first, not in a trilogy this time, not of a double trilogy like the new one's going to get, the first of two amazing Spider Man films, starring, of course, Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker/slash Spider Man. A very controversial reboot, which I guess we'll get into very shortly. But first of all, Dave, how are we tonight? Are you excited to talk about this
Very
Spider Man?
good. Thank you very much, my friend. Very good.
Definitely, and it's going to be interesting. I don't think we've ever spoke about this. Me and you. I know we spoke a lot about Maguire as offhand. I know we spoke a lot about
Yeah.
the new one coming out, and I know that you were on. Were you on both or one of the Tom Holland reviews we did? So I
No, I think I was
can't.
on both on the. I think I did both of the Tom Holland on the Marvel retrospective.
There we go, getting those Spider-Man numbers up. So, as always, before we get into it, I'm gonna go over the socials. Firstly, the Amazing Spider-Man. I think it's fair to say this is a film that's, I want to say, had maybe more of a bounce back reputation. The duo, maybe more than one of the two films. But I want to know your thoughts. Were you a fan of the originals? Was this a shock? Did you grow up with these, as some people claim they do? Not to sort of take the piss, but I don't know how people can grow up with films across 2 years that got rebooted 2 years after. But if you did, comment me wrong. Please prove me wrong, because I'm very curious to hear their thoughts. Of course, hit that subscribe button. We're building the journey to No Way Home. It is, of course, at the time this video going, we are 1 week away from it coming out in the UK. The countdown is in. It's very exciting, and the second review is going to come out this Sunday because we were doing reviews every Wednesday, and we obviously can't cross those two over. So, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is going to be this Sunday for those of you interested in that one. And as always, if you want to find out about videos, been more than just Spider-Man videos, but at the moment it's all Spider-Man. Hit us up on our social medias, Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinema savvy, and of course we have a link to TeePublic in that description below. And we also have a link to Dave's channel in the description below, who also joined us on Ghostbusters recently and said many other Marvel films. But rewinding the clocks, maybe before the MCU, dependent on where this goes, as we leave the Raimi trilogy, I'm very curious to know your thoughts as a wrap up. What are your thoughts on those three films heading into Amazing Spider-Man, maybe on a rewatch or at the time of them being released? Do you remember any of that gap in between?
Yeah, I mean, it was. I was kind of almost a bit butthurt by Spider-Man 3. I loved Spider-Man. Spider-Man 1's great. I loved Spider-Man 2, like everybody does, because it's almost perfect superhero movie. And then I remember going to see Spider-Man 3, and I did one of those where there's a certain cinema local where you can hire like a private box where you're up above the actual screen and you've got your own little room with your own speakers and seats and got loads of friends. Like, let's hire it out. We'll go watch Spider-Man 3. And I'm so sorry for taking you to see Spider-Man 3. It was just a film that did not resonate with me at all. I had a really tough time with it, although I have watched it again in the lead up to watching Spider-Man, and there are moments that I do actually quite like in it as well. So it's certainly one that's come back to me. But yeah, it was kind of that strange gap where we were lined up almost for Spider-Man 4 and everyone was waiting on that announcement. And then it was suddenly like, nope, we're not doing that. We're now got a new Spider-Man. We're now going a different way because we probably saw this film about a bat, and now we're going to do something completely different with Spider-Man. And so yeah, it was a strange time where you were with Tobey Maguire, you had this whole character arc, you were in that story, and it was sort of just, yep, it's gone, forget about it. We're not going to take anything that we've seen before. We're moving on.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing to do because obviously we've done three videos on the original trilogy, technically twice over on the channel in the 6 years we've been around, but the gap between Spider-Man 3 and this was fascinating. So age-wise, I was almost 11 when Spider-Man 3 came out. I'd grown up with that trilogy and I was waiting for the fourth one. And obviously, when you're at secondary school, well, not secondary school, that late noughties internet era where you would get Rick rolled on YouTube a lot. I don't know if you ever did this, but you would search for film trailers that hadn't ever been released. Because of that age, well, maybe the age I was or the internet's age, I wasn't conscious of news. I wasn't conscious of things. Films just came out. And I always
Yeah.
remember hearing that Spider-Man 4 was going to have the lizard. We'd seen him in Spider-Man 2 and 3. We were finally going to get the lizard. It was going to be the big villain. And then I just remember nothing. No trailer, no filming dates. And I want to say '08, I started getting to film The Dark Knight properly. And you start to follow productions. And there's nothing on Spider-Man 4. And then suddenly, The Amazing Spider-Man is announced. And Tobey Maguire is gone and Andrew Garfield's in. And I don't think I was the right age to realize how catastrophically large that decision probably was. And as time's gone by, maybe I'd say it more in Amazing Spider-Man 2. There's gonna be a lot of Bond comparisons that you had this. I don't want to say immaculate first version. You had the Sean Connery, right? Maguire was Spider-Man. He was the first live-action Spider-Man. He had made it what it is, the films. And then you get your George Lazenby. And don't mean a criticism on Garfield, sorry, but it's like, oh, another one really soon after. And I remember saying, oh, okay. And then I don't know if you remember the first trailer they did. It was like I don't know if you ever played Mirror's Edge. It was like a point of view GoPro thing. Like it was Spider-Man running around New York as a teaser trailer and like swinging around. And the whole goal was like, this is a new Spider-Man. This is different. And all this stuff. And I think it came out when I was just finishing year 11. I just finished my GCSEs. So the only thing I cared about was the Dark Knight Rises. And I want to say this came out 2 weeks before Dark Knight Rises did. And I won't get to my initial thoughts on it at the time, but it was very interesting that I kind of didn't care there was a new Spider-Man. I don't know if you were the same, that the film just came out and I wasn't opposed to it. I wasn't not hyped for it. I was like, oh, a new Spider-Man. Cool. I don't know if you ever had anything like that.
It's a strange one because you kind of brought this new character life, but there's a character you've been involved with. I mean, I've been a fan of Spider-Man for a long time throughout my just growing up and things. So it's been a character that's been there. To then so you get a new iteration, you're kind of like, all right, that's it's going to be fine. And I wasn't really aware of Andrew Garfield much at the time, and he'd done some. For me, he'd been in a Doctor Who episode a long time ago, and that's kind of the only where I'd kind of seen him anywhere. It's a really old episode. I can't remember which Doctor it was. Might be the Tennant era. I'm not sure. But yeah, so he's in a like Doctor Who episode, and then after that, it's kind of like, all right, you see him, and then you start seeing like the new suit and things and the designs, and like they are going in a different sort of way. And okay, I'll see what it's like. And then I think your comparisons, like when you say about Dark Knight Rises coming out, there is so much Batman Begins in this movie. It's quite incredible how they've literally taken that as a blueprint and gone, do you see what they did with that Batman movie and brought in this real life surrounding and not played up no bright characters, no like bright, colorful scenes. We're going to mute it right down. We're going to take it down to street level, and most of it's going to be set in the dark and with a man with no tattoo on his wrist. That in a bit. Yeah. So yeah, it was a very different take on the character, but I do like some of the take of the way he plays it. But I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit down this review.
No, definitely. I didn't know it was in Doctor Who. I tell you what, I remember I'd seen the Imaginary of Doctor Panisius. I can never pronounce it. The film he does the film.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it, and when they cast it, I was like, oh, it's that kid from Dr. Panisius. And obviously, I hadn't seen Social Network until probably a couple of years after this came out, maybe. So I hadn't really seen him in much. But one thing I don't know if you know this is maybe going to surprise you. At the time of the film coming out, Andrew Garfield was older than Tobey Maguire was at the time Spider-Man 1 came out. Now that blew my head up when I saw that recently, because not a diss on Maguire or Garfield. Andrew Garfield still looks really young. He's 38 at the moment, and he still looks like he's in his early 20s. Like, he's got like such a young face. And I think, Caston was sort of talking about Garfield. Yeah, and talking about sort of Andrew Garfield, like in the role, I don't think he's bad in this. Like, you mentioned all the changes, the Nolanisms and stuff. That is 100% Sony through and through. Like, what's popular at the time? Like, The Dark Knight has been humongous. Batman Begins was a big hit. The MCU isn't that big yet. People need to clock this. This is going to be the big, amazing Spider-Man 2 thing. 2012 was the same year the Avengers came out, where it all changed. And that's why Amazing Spider-Man 2's got a color palette. This was still the Nolan is comic books, wasn't it? That's kind of how it was for a few years. That it's all about getting dark and gritty and all that kind of stuff. And even looking at the background of the photo, the suit looks great in the photo because it's dark and you haven't got awful yellow sunglasses. In the film, we'll get into the whole spice later, but there's quite a literal night and day between costume, how they look, and things like that. And it's I can't do anything but rant about. I'm not going to rant about Sony. I'm going to say that for part 2 because of the monstrosity of what they planned after and what's kind of maybe happening now. But I think a lot of the problems this will have bringing in Mark Webb. I know he done indie films, very much the Marvel trope, getting a young director who's done indie films, see if he can do it. Whereas Sony is sort of be bringing a young director, so we tell them what to do. They make our film. Sam Raimi was a big name. Spider-Man 3, clash of Venom with Avi Arad's. Sony wins, and I think they knew the person we get now, we're gonna be in control with at the first minute. That's how I always felt about Mark Webb. That I'm not saying he got hired because of his surname, but he's one of them where I saw a report saying that, talking about the new film, this isn't a spoiler. This is formally announced. We have confirmed the return of Electro and Lizards. So I can say that in the trailer. And what they have said is they consulted with Sam Raimi and Mark Webb about what happened next in their worlds to get to the characters where they are now. Because obviously we'll talk about Lizard properly later, but I actually didn't remember rewatching this day if he died or survived at the end. That's how irrelevant this film's memory's been on me. And it made me think that, going to Sam Raimi for Raimi World's advice, sure, he would have had logically things planned. Them going to Mark Webb saying, "Sorry, Mark Webb, what was your plan?" And I'm there like, I don't think he ever had a plan. Not that he couldn't come up with one, is that he wasn't allowed to have a plan. It was
it wasn't
plan.
his story to tell.
Yeah, and it's things like that I'm not saying this one's dead on entry, but I think I can say for maybe both of us, I'll let you sort of go into it first. We spoke earlier. This film hasn't held up over 9 years.
No, it really hasn't. And I said it before, we kind of just now chat for when we were coming on and things. I watched this, I'd only seen this once when it came out. And in my mind, when we were talking about, do you want to come on and do the Amazing Spider-Man review? Like, yeah, of course, I really enjoyed Amazing Spider-Man. Until I watched it again this week to just catch up with it again, to make sure I came on and actually knew what I was talking about and that I had seen it, was fresh in my mind, and did not have the same time with this movie that I thought I had. There are languishing distances of how you get through a story, and there are so many beats that are from the first Spider-Man movie again, like literally beat for beat. A lot of it is telling a but much longer process. So yeah, I did not have as good a time as I was expecting to. There are moments, and there are some characters and some actors who are definitely got the right memo and they know what they're doing, but there's just a lot that I did not enjoy with this movie on this new watch.
I'm the carbon copy. I think I messaged you just as I've been on it, sort of 5-10 minutes, and I was totally blown away that this hadn't, because I was wondering, I did the intros for the first 3 videos. I was like, does the Amazing Spider-Man have intros? I was like, is there a title card? And then the film started, I was like, wait, they literally have the webs forming the Amazing Spider-Man, like the last 3 films that they've just rebooted, and that was a sign of what's to come. I think you're right. There's a lot of things they actually carried over from the old ones, and I think 9 years later, as I said, we've had Avengers, but we've not just had the Avengers. We've had a complete, not even a rebirth. What's the opposite of rebirth? Like how far this genre's gone. These comic book films, the fact you can take comic book pages, the ones like this stand out now as sort of, I always call them quite soulless. Yeah. That this is a studio film, and they're all studio films deep down, but this is a studio film. This is a Sony consultation of what we have to do, probably to retain the rights to the character. And we don't want to work with Raimi. There was a release date, of course, for Spider-Man 4. There was a villain planned called the Lizard. Even Mysterio for me get even further down the line, and the Vulture for further down the line. But yeah, let's really get into talking about Spider-Man. Also, guys, we don't think it's going to be as long as the other ones because there's not as much good things to say. We're going to give it a fair go. Because I think one of the things I've always took, there are the 2 best things from these films, like Shadow of a Doubt is obviously Emma Stone, Andrew Garfield. And watching this again today, I was quite not disappointed in Andrew Garfield, not at all. I think he's fine in this film, and I think he's doing a hell of a job with what he's given. And it made me think, I was like, I think I said this to you, I was like, I'm really excited for Spider-Man 2 now, because I'm the same as you. I didn't mind this film when it came out. I like the whole dark and gritty. It was a different take on Spider-Man. But as we look at it now, not because we've had Tom Holland, not because they all might be coming back, I think just the way, even maybe Amazing Spider-Man 2 has something to do with it. The whole dark night, gritty, everything. That's not who Spider-Man is. Batman,
no.
Go for it. He is that. You can do it. But Spider-Man isn't that. And Andrew Garfield in this film, there are moments where I really hate him. And it's not like the arrogant of him. It's not his performance. It's it's what they're doing with the character feels like not a betrayal, but it's the origin film, isn't it? But we've
That
saved a
ain't my
section for
Spider-Man,
Awesome.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like
Oh, don't get me started on the
it's
origin.
yeah, but
But let's
this is
do it.
it. Like you messaged me like an hour in, I was like, Batman Begins has him get an origin hour in. The comparisons, Karen, and the basis I'm going to have to hand over to you because I'm trying not to rant. Andrew Garfield is far too cool to play Peter Parker. He's a great Spider-Man, and
Yeah.
he's a terrible, terrible, terrible costume. Maybe one of the worst comic book costumes I've ever seen. Actually, we were watching this today. And it's like we have to be the opposite of what we've already done. And because the Raimi trilogy, not being biased, the costume design is page to screen. I don't think it'll ever get done. But I think with the Holland films, they've done the best they can, bringing an MCU style. But the definitive Spider-Man suit has been done. But they went so 180 that we don't want to be associated to it. It just looks awful in this film. And I know they change it in the sequel, but the
Yeah, I
fact
was
you
going to say
don't
you're
even
going to
have
see a much better suit and talk about a much better suit when you get to the next movie where they actually went a bit more comic accurate.
yeah, and it's like they're in not denial, but they've just gone so far to the other end of things that they just can't have the comparison, and it's quite sad really because immediately the two films that stand by themselves don't even have their own continuity with one another. And I think that's where I've struggled a bit is that it doesn't add up with what comes next. And I'm curious. I've said I'm excited for rewatching the Maze Spider-Man 2. I'm excited for maybe the right or wrong reason. I don't know yet. It's been 7 years since I've seen that, but I want to know your thoughts on Garfield because I know a lot of people love him, and I do love him. But I think in this film, he hasn't got a lot to work with.
You're right. I think you're right. It's a film made by Studio Notes, and that's how it feels when you watch it. I think Garfield is a great. If anybody is watching this and has just seen him in Tick Tick Boom, he is incredible. He's got such a now broad range of movies behind him as well. He's coming a really, really exceptional actor, who I think we'll see for a long time doing way more movies outside of the Marvel movies and Sony movies and I don't even want to say it because I get the wording wrong of the Sony Marvel Spunk or whatever
Oh, they've
they call it.
rechanged it already. Spunk is no
Oh,
more. It took them a couple of years to realize it doesn't work. I think it's the Sony
so yeah,
Pictures, Sony Spider-Man Universe, the SSU, which sounds like some kind of communist World War thing.
but no, I think Garfield is a great actor for the role of Spider-Man. Absolutely. If you've got to think, well, who can we get to play the Spider-Man who's going to be quite snarky and has a bit of humor behind him and still can deliver gravitas when we need it? Andrew Garfield is a great pick for that, and he plays Spider-Man. Great, the quips he makes when he's talking to the police, when he's getting bad guys, when he's wearing them up. He just plays that really well. It is like the speech bubbles that you would find in a comic book come from his mouth. You're like, yeah, that's absolutely Spider-Man talking. But when we get to his Peter Parker, he's not Peter Parker. This is really bad. He's too good looking a guy, and they didn't even kind of go out to kind of make him. Let's dull that down a little bit. Let's make him not as. He seems like he'd be one of the popular kids at that school. He tries and breaks up a fight of a kid who's getting beaten up, and just like, you know what? He's just, I just don't. It doesn't work for me in that character as Peter Parker. He's not got that run down look. He's not that kid who's, yes, he gets beaten up by Flash at the start, but you know, I can see two 40-year-olds fighting anytime I want to on the internet. But it just doesn't quite work for me for Peter Parker. Yet I do love his chemistry with Emma Stone. Yes, because they'd started dating partway through filming, but it really tells. And Emma Stone is probably my standout favorite character from the movies, just because she plays it to the T. But their chemistry between each other is so well done, and they play off each other really well in both the good moments and the sadder moments in the movie, that when they can't see each other later on. But yeah, just Andrew Garfield as Peter Parker doesn't work for me. Just even this whole training skateboarding montage does not work for me.
It's such a weird one because again, I'm without trying to get the Tobey comparisons into too much, I would say the common conception online is that Tobey is the best Peter Parker, Andrew is the best Spider-Man, and Tom Holland is not the best at both, but more even than both. I think that's
Through
what
the
my
middle,
opinion
yeah,
that
yeah.
is like. I'd say common perception. And you're right, the Spider-Man stuff is again the fact he's in an awful costume. The CGI looks great on the swinging, on the movement stuff, and 2012 CGI. You know, watching the first few Spider-Man films, the progression is incredible amongst all three.
Yeah.
But when you're in 2012, I think you're practically where we are now, aren't you? You've got 1080p, you've got fluid, you've got movement, you've got motion capture, whatever you need. They're pretty much there, I think. And it's great seeing all this stuff swinging around the city, the fight scenes, what they can do in frame, and then you get Peter Parker, and I'm just there like, I'd hang out with him. I mean, I can be nerdy, so maybe I would have hung out with. I probably wouldn't have hung out with Peter Parker in Spider-Man 1 before you get bitten. But it's one of those things where, you know, the school stuff, like we get a bit more time at school, which is great. Cause that was a big thing with the first three you didn't get because he graduated third way through the first film. But then it's you're right, the Emma Stone stuff we'll get into because she's so good in this film. Even Flash, like that looks like a genuine bully, you know, and an early tens bully as well.
Bit
Like,
old for high school, but yeah, a bit still.
Yeah, there was always like the skinhead bully. Like I love how different films have different eras, and Flash Thompson being the bully in the newer films, not going to get into that, but it's not a Wes Anderson film that he shouldn't have been Flash Thompson. But it's one of them where like he's far too cool. Like the skateboarding, also like really minor. And I picked this up today, and it's so childish, so I might sound a bit of an anger. I was really pissed off to see him wearing Jordans in it, and this is so petty, so don't really take much. But Spider-Man, the Peter Parker has been a character in poverty from the roots, from nothing, living with his uncle and auntie to where he ends up. And it's so minor to talk about Jordans, you know, maybe he saved up or something, I don't know. But it's like he doesn't ever feel like he's had a difficult life. Obviously, we're going to get a whole ridiculous elevated backstory we'll get into later on. But I don't get a sense of getting into him compared to, I just don't really care for him. Like, I don't mind him because it's Garfield, but I don't think they've written him well. I think it's maybe a better way of saying it. That he's too indecisive. He's almost like bipolar in it, the way he acts with certain people, and I'm a bit perplexed. And they're like, okay, we need you to be a geek, but be a weirdo geek. So you get all the weird like hand gestures and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, really? Like, again, it's not. This isn't Garfield person. I think this is Sony through and through. And the worst bit about all of it, could you say, is the villain? Like, I know we've said a lot about Garfield, but
yeah,
I think going back to the Batman Begins stuff, I think me and Chris spoke about some Spider-Man 1. The modern trend is that you do a minor big villain in the first film. So someone from the, what would you call it, the rogue gallery, there's a big name. Yeah. Maybe it's not been done, or maybe he's just not like top tier. Get him in the first film, then you set up the big bad for the second. You Joker car scene in the Batman Begins, and obviously this one we get the Lizard, which is the most ridiculous, ironic villain of all time, purely because one of the reasons they cancelled Spider-Man 4 was Sony said that no one would be invested in a complete CGI villain, which was going to be the Lizard anyway. And so the reboot has the Lizard in. What do you make of that before we even actually get to see him?
It's a tough one because, I mean, Risa fans was probably given the party to come off the back of Notting Hill. I think it was probably where he's come off the back of when he got this, probably. I don't know the actual times lining up, but he'd done such a good job in that movie that he kind of got offered around. He started doing. Yes, Eyeball Paul, Kevin and Perry. That's the role.
When he got cast, I remember going to my sister's like, Eyeball Paul's in the Spider-Man film. I'm like, what? I was like, Eyeball Paul is going to be in the Spider-Man film, and I can never unsee it. It's like Peter Capaldi as Doctor Who. I can't unsee Malcolm Tucker.
So yeah, it's not bad casting. I mean, he's not a bad actor by any means. I just don't know if he's Dr. Kurt Connors. I mean, they set it up sort of in the background of the Raimi films that this character was a professor and he's always there throughout the school. I just don't know what it is about him. The bad CG taking his arm away. When I watched the movie, it stood out. Like every shot had to have a little bit of this arm stump sticking out of the coat. It wasn't just like the missing arm jacket hanging down that you had previously. I don't know. Something about they told me that every time I saw him, I was like, "You're wearing a green sock over your hand," and I can tell. And it was just a really bad thing. Like it's just no, that doesn't work the way you've done it. Whether he's the right character, I don't think he was probably the worst villain they could have used. It's not a bad character. It's not an A-list villain, really, although he's like a Sinister Six character. They just went a bit too. I don't know if they went in too hard on him to make him Oscorp and Harry Osborn's no, Harry, yeah, Norman Osborn's dying, and I just I don't know. It doesn't the whole story doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's I don't even remember the '90s animated show, but it was like with
Yeah,
Lizard. I loved he always had a snout, and it's really childish to sort of judge it on appearance, not character. But I think you sort of hit the nail on the head that
just
he
that
doesn't
plain
have
face.
much character depth. That the concept of a man that wants to regrow his arm because he lost his is a really like as a scientist is a really interesting arc, and
Yeah,
for it
yeah,
to be wrong and you're the creation of your failed experiment is incredible. It's very Spider-Man as well, but the whole we're doing this for Norman Osborn. We're going to now test on the military. Whereas the way that always kind of I'd always seen the character was this very sympathetic villain, and I think this is where these films start to go wrong. That all
they get
these
it with one shot in the whole movie, and there's the bit where he's standing by the glass window, and he holds
yeah
his hand out to look at the reflection of his how he would look with both hands, and I think that is the Lizard. That's Kurt Connors right there, and that is absolutely nailed on, and it's perfect the way they do that. They just don't have enough of that for me in that character. Like they veer away from it too much.
yeah, and then suddenly his plan is to turn the entirety of New York into lizards with a gas because it is now perfection, and I'm there like you again not to sort of do with the whole like this is rubbish, but you're now idolizing your failed experiment that his goal was to get the hand, and that was also probably maybe you mentioned the mirror scene, which is great. The moment where he has to peel it
When he
back
gets it.
and you get the hand, and it's quite scary because it's all gooey. I'm just gonna say it. I was freaking out. Um, but I love that whole sequence where it's his experiment, it's working, and then suddenly oh, it's green and he's the lizards, and we're on the car rampage, and they've really, I think they missed the point of the character. I think they tried to do a whole this is such a big moment when it didn't need to be, and we're going to really hold off on the Oscar Illuminati thing because I know it's a big problem with it, but it, it makes it feel small. Like, oh look, Gwen Stacy just happens to be his main intern for the year, and he just happens to have worked with Peter's dad. He just happens to be working on the mutation to save Norman Osborn and all this kind of stuff. Which listen, coincidences in the films is a common film trope, but when it's done so painfully, it's really awful. And I think you're right, Reese
Yeah,
Ifans. I think he's a very talented actor, and I
yeah,
think he's often shied away from Hollywood roles as well. And he did Harry Potter at a similar time, very small role, British production as well, but it was such not an odd choice for Lizard, but it was Reese Ifans doing a Marvel. I mean, I don't think back then saying XYZ doing a Marvel film, I don't think it's as much an obvious. Nowadays, like an actor
yeah,
emerges, and it's like, so which Marvel character is he going to play when his time comes? Whereas then it was still like this actor's taking on a comic book role. This is a big deal to comic books, and I just think, yeah, like, I mean, I would maybe go out on a limb and say this to sum up Lizard in that film. I'm more surprised Reef is coming back than any other villain in No Way Home because he's the one I thought would probably want nothing to do with it. Whether or not he's just doing grunt noises, I don't know. But
I
if we
was
see
going to say, I
human,
wonder if they've, if we're going to see the actual actor in that, or if it's just, or we're just going to see the Lizard. Is question. Obviously, we don't know. I know they've recently released a video online of like the villain lineup where we're having an interview with, and you've got Defoe and Molina and Jamie Foxx being interviewed, but that's sort of it. So it kind of makes me wonder if we're getting Lizard, but we're getting
CGI.
just a Lizard.
Yeah, and it's like Sandman as well. That I always forget his name. The one
Yeah,
from
yeah,
George of the Jungle, but I can't see if he came out great, but because he literally looked like a comic book page. But if they are, I mean, we know they're in the new film. They confirm again. Why would they confirm an Empire magazine? It's such a bonkers thing to do by Sony. Obviously, they're in the trailer. It's fine, but to cast wise, yeah, like if Reed Fistons is a bit, I hope he gets not a bit of justice. But obviously, the way his character arc ends is that he, he gets what would you say cured. So he gets the anti venom vaccine, whatever you want to call it,
yeah.
and suddenly he's saving Peter Parker's life, and it wasn't him all along, and he's in a straitjacket in prison, and I think I think we said it. I think they missed the point, but I think they also, by not developing the villain, you're focused so on hand at the origin story, you're sacrificing your villain development because they obviously spend so much time on Gwen Stacy, sort of segueing over into the good parts of the film, who is probably one of the most famous comic characters ever for being known to die after Uncle Ben, who we also get in this film as well. You know, when you think of when you think of Gwen Stacy, it's the famous death scene, but I will say that Emma Stone nailed it 100%. First time asking, absolutely perfect.
Yeah, she's probably, as I said earlier, she's probably the standout character for me in this. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the role she was playing. She plays it absolutely perfectly. The way Andrew Garfield is given a script for Peter Parker, like probably not the Peter. And we've got to remember that Garfield, like, this is a massive Spider-Man fan as well, which is like also been Comic-Con in a suit and talked about his experience like Spider-Man. He's not given Peter Parker. He probably has zero serious. This isn't Peter Parker, but Emma Stone's given this character Gwen that play out also two movies, and yeah, she got her on. She again chemistry in her and Garfield exception. Like everything she plays Gwen in school. I Stone has that like team role as well as in high school. Brilliant, and moving into the Oscorp as well. It's a bit like that she's the lead and the science group that just happens to be doing this experimental mutation stuff. But yeah, I think she's perfect. I think she plays the part with Dennis Leary. I think she plays really well of him as well for the role of the father-daughter as well. I think that's done really well. Although I hate that scene around the dinner table where Peter's arguing with him about police politics. It feels really. I suppose maybe it's meant to feel really uncomfortable, but it really is uncomfortable. And then he just tells you Spider-Man like immediately. It took an hour for him to become Spider-Man. He tells Gwen Stacy he's Spider-Man in about 3.5 seconds.
I think it's the bit that makes me not laugh, but yeah, like they've built, and it's quite like not caring, but they're obviously taking the piss out of Mary Jane from the lessons, right? Like, oh, do you know who I am? Like, yeah, I'm just checking, who you are, and it's the whole, the awkward wave thing, and I do like the fact that Gwen Stacy's always been the first girlfriend. I think one thing I'll say about the reboot, not just getting this right, not doing Mary Jane was probably a really good thing to do, considering they nabbed almost everything else. It was like, he has had other girlfriends. You can talk about other girlfriends. And Gwen Stacy, I think, technically was the first girlfriend in the comics. So I'm not just casting Emma Stone, but just using that character straight away made it more interesting. And you mentioned the dad character as well. One of the things I loved of this, obviously, we always talk about J. Jonah Jameson, that he's like the secondary antagonist that, yes, he's comic relief, but there is a serious like antagonist role there. And I really like the fact that they I hate the whole, he's a vigilante, it's the Dark Knight again, it's Batman Begins again. They can't have this, but I think the concept that the secondary antagonist is the police kind of works. That it's not J. Jonah Jameson, but you get another villain factor, kind of.
Yeah, it has that vibe of like we've got an extra thing fighting against Spider-Man as well as the main villain that he's after. And it's fine. It pays off to the end of he shows the captain his face, and it's great. Now, but stay away from my daughter. Give us that promise. So it has that. It works. That story plot point does work well for the actual movie. It has a full arc. It has a beginning of where they meet, and when he reveals, and that then this payoff that that's great, but stay away from Gwen, even though he's not going to be there. Make that promise. So I do like that, but I don't know if the Spider-Man that we had, I just still didn't quite buy that whole police after him. He's this friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's not quite as friendly a neighborhood Spider-Man in this movie. But yeah, I think the one thing that the Tom Holland stories did so well, the films did so well, is got rid of all the origin stuff. Like, nobody needs to now know that Spider-Man got bit by a radioactive spider. If that's not in your brain already, no matter how young or old you are, you know what happened. And I think they just mentioned, I got bit by a spider, speaking to Ned, and that's all you need. And it just spent so much of the film getting to that point, it's an hour of the film's gone, so everything else feels rushed. Like, now we're going to do this, and now you're going to have this payoff with the police, but now we're going to put that story in there as well. So the police side of it, chasing him down, just doesn't really help with a lot of the story. The captain stuff I really like as her dad, and I think that would still play in the movie without the rest of the police chasing Spider-Man down.
Yeah, it's very, not just mentioning Batman Begins, but I think there's a payoff. But I think what you said, it's so ridiculous she finds out so soon that he's Spider-Man. But it would have been great had she never knew at the end of the first film that it was him, and that promise with George Stacey would be even better, because I love that dynamic with him, and I think he played a really good police captain. But also, you can tell he's a good father. That, you know, the way he tells, like, get into the car, I'm going to go and I'm going to make sure he's all right. And you kind of know he's going to die the moment he steps on the roof. Like, you know, he's not going to obviously survive against the lizard and whatnot. But it's also really weird when April Paul also is like, oh, the captain. And it's like, oh yeah, you killed him, and now you're kind of
he just eviscerated him.
Yeah, and it's I love his character arc. I know they try the whole ghost stuff with him in Spider-Man 2, which is a bit weird personally, but the whole promise concept is a really good end point for his relationship with Gwen, because it's obviously, you know, going back to the first three, you know, doing something different. He doesn't get MJ till the end of 2, whereas this one, like, he's with us so quickly, you need to then split them up to bring them back to then get the ending, you know, you're going to get with the sequel with the Green Goblin. And I think the Emma Stone stuff, she just nailed it. And also, like, she's smart, and not to diss on, you know, the original trilogy, but obviously when you get to Spider-Man 3, it reaches the point of, okay, it's just Mary Jane Watson in peril now, damsel in distress, but just the same every film, not even a different attempt of it, just the same. We know you're Spider-Man, we're going to take her and you're going to come save her. Whereas the fact that Emma Stone's quite capable, not to diss on MJ too much, but you trust her in those situations. I think that's why it works with her. And they're the things that do work, is their relationship. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because I remember that was a really big thing before the film came out. And I know that obviously Tom Holland is now in a relationship with Zendaya as well. So history's kind of repeated itself. But it is one of those things where, you know, they've got such a good chemistry on screen. You can kind of see why maybe stuff happened after. And I think you do get a lot of couples that do that in films, that you can see there's something else going on. But, you know, a big staple point of the Spider-Man films, Uncle Ben coming out of retirement to get killed once more. This is going to be an awkward point. So it's so hard to compare them to the old films, because it's really unfair to compare them. You know, Uncle Ben is literally just a doomed character more than any other character. He is the origin, his death. Aunt May is always, you know, the victim of it, the person Pete has to have the guilt. I will say Sally Jenkins is great, underrated in the character. And I think, sorry, I just realized I got the wrong. I was like, who the hell is Sally Jenkins? Sally Field, yes. Obviously, classic from what I watched recently. How on earth I've forgotten Mrs. Doubtfire's name. But Sally Field, I think, works really well in the role. And I think, again, if you're casting that man Uncle Ben, the two they went for, Martin Sheen and so they've got good chemistry.
Yeah.
It's just a bit wasted with the whole over elaborate mother-father dropping son off backstory. And I've never seen, oh god, what's the TV series of Martin Sheen in? West Wing?
West Wing.
Which is meant to be one of the best shows ever made.
It's so good.
And I think you've gone for, you know, fair play to Marie, but you've gone for, like, not an A-lister, but you've gone for, like, an acting, what would you call it? Like, just a legendary actor playing a very small role. It's a big coup to get Martin Sheen. And the biggest problem I have with Uncle Ben in this, because I really like Martin Sheen in it, I think they're great as Uncle Ben and Aunt May. They get to do a bit more. Obviously, they're younger than Rosemary Harris and Cliff Robertson were. Obviously, they go maybe a bit too young in the next films. But the moral obligation monologue is single-handedly one of my least favorite scenes in a film ever, because everybody you kind of said it, you know, everybody knows Spider-Man gets bitten by a spider. Everybody knows Uncle Ben dies and says, with great power comes great responsibility. You knew that before you knew what Spider-Man was. And it's when I remember being at the cinema the first time I heard it, and it's like, and then you have a moral obligation to do better, and they're like, what? And I was like, just it's like Green Goblin, like, just say it, like, just, you know, just say the words. And they don't want to, and it's really. I mean, they don't even do it now. Still, in absolute truth.
No, yeah.
But then again, it's not a direct origin. We're just now getting that 6 years later as an animated series for some reason. What do you make of them? Because this also like I don't know. I'll let you get into before I even get on about his death as well.
I think they're actually again. I think you're right. They're really well cast, and they play really well as this older couple who have lived together a long time and had to grow up with this, that to raise this boy who was dropped off on their door. And I do love that relationship. I think this is probably where Andrew Garfield comes off worst, when he starts to like not do things. He's like, he becomes a real dick. Like
Just to pick her
breaking
up.
the door with the glass and just not picking her up. And like, yes, I know you're supposed to see that lead up as why he's going to run off, which is what he does, and why Uncle Ben then has the issue to then get dead. But it just, yeah, they you're right. It's, they've given a big actor not much to do, and I just don't. I like the Uncle Ben character, but I just don't see again why we needed another Spider-Man to do the same thing to give us the same lesson we've already had not very long ago, really, between the trilogy that we had to this one, to then go, right, we're going to just do this all over again, give you the same beats. He's not going to, this time it's not going to be by the guy, let's go out the wrestling thing. It's going to be a guy in a convenience store is going
It's
to run out, and
Edge from
for
WWE.
some reason on an empty street in New York at this time of night where there's no one else about, Uncle Ben, for some reason, is going to die for a gun that's on the floor when he has no reason to. There's no one else around that's going to get hurt. If that guy picks up that gun, he runs off, but he still goes for it and ends up getting shot. And I don't know. And there's just that there's no last words between Ben and like dying Ben and Peter. They're just like, he's dead when he gets this. Like, that's, you need that last moment. That's the look in the eyes. That's maybe the moment where you get the great power comes great responsibility, and just give him it there and then, rather than as many words as they can to dance around it. Just underutilized, I think, is kind of the real bane of that character for me.
It's again, I'm going to compare him. They didn't do the wrestling, which is fine. I get that, It's, I know it's a famous company, but you can get away. Okay, let's try something new. What's your new Uncle Ben death? Well, Peter Parker was 2 cents short to buy a bottle of milk, so Edge robs the store. Maybe like half Edge, half Kurt Cobain back from the dead or something, or I don't know, drugged up or whatever you want it to be. And he throws him the milk to form their alliance. And then he says, "What's Peter Parker's words to the shop employee? Like, not my."
Oh, it's not my in policy or something like that. It's not in the something like that. Yeah.
You're right. When the gun hit, I don't remember the gun hitting the floor. I remember Uncle Ben trying to do something, but when the gun hits the floor, Mr. Moral Obligation, you haven't got the power to be morally obligating picking up a gun to try and save him. Like, and I think that's what kind of struck a chord that you mentioned how bad sort of Peter treats him. That's what I don't like. Smashing the door. I get where he's coming from, the whole like, you're not my dad thing and all that, but when it was like, how dare you?
Smashing the door, that CGI glass that falls out of that door is awful. It looks terrible.
and this is it. It's just so odd. And then you're right. There's nothing on the death. He's just shot. Edge gets away. We never see him again for either film.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's another. But it doesn't resolve that story at all. And that's supposed to be why the police would be after, because he's got the killer, and that's where you want him to kind of take that moral decision to be a good guy and not the vigilante, not the killer. He's not going to do that, and that's when Uncle Ben's words should reverberate around him, that he's got the guy who killed him, and he's not going to do the same to him. And it's doesn't go through. He finds other blonde guys throughout New York going around picking them up. Are
you a car thief? Are you blonde with long hair? Yes. Okay, Spider-Man's coming for you. And it's when the police like he just keeps going. Yeah, like he just keeps going after everybody with the same description. I was like, there's a lot of good carjackers out there that have the same, like maybe they're in like a group with one another. But it's so ridiculous. The whole death scene, it just doesn't add up. And then the whole like police report as well was like the cops like he's got a tattoo as ever. It's like no shit. Like Peter Parker watched him. He was there, and it's. I think what annoys me more is that when you look at the both death scenes, that the guilt Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man has, that he, oh, okay, Andrew Garfield forgot to pick apart May from work. That's bad. And Uncle Ben does blow it out of proportion, which does make him look like a dick.
Yeah.
But then they argued, and that's it. The guilt is that they just had an argument, and I'm sure they had arguments over the years. But when you go back to the old film, it's Peter was selfishly trying to get a car to impress a girl. He went wrestling, not to the library, and his uncle drove him, and he was killed in passing. He wasn't picked. It was a car. Well, a carjacker got him / Sandman. Versus and in the car they had the argument. His final conversation was a full-blown argument, but from a selfish purpose. And this is where I got so lost with this again that it's just kind of a waste of Martin Sheen. Maybe like, yeah, you can do the dolly bits, but
Yeah.
they needed a moment between them because Andrew Garfield doesn't seem like he's going out for revenge. Whereas when you get that scene in Spider-Man 1, Peter's going to kill him. Even Spider-Man 3, to its credit, he's trying to kill Sandman straight up for killing his uncle. And I think they really missed the point of the character in this film. And it sort of goes back to give him credit for Holland that at least at the third time asking, no one needs to get an origin this time around. You got to introduce him in the world that already exists that's full of superheroes. I know the rumor was he was going to be the kid in Iron Man 2 that put his hand up. I think maybe that will be canon in the series, but they've always said it's him. But it's a real lame. And also like when he starts like attacking people in the streets dressed normally, then he's got a red tie over his head. That even all that stuff just seems a bit like nonsense. And I just think this film's completely missed whatever you need with Uncle Ben, and it just bloats the story. It's another subplot finding revenge, and it's a subplot, as you said, that goes nowhere once the police get involved to kickstart their subplot.
Yeah, it's just a difficult take, and I just think that the as I said a bit before, they put so much in the origin story that they get an hour into your film, and you've now got Spider-Man. Great, we're here. They then go, oh, we've got like an hour left to kill, and we've got to now get the whole movie into that. And it's just like, well, okay, you've kind of underutilized characters that you brought in, and you've brought in probably too big a actor to kind of go through. And I think as well, the thing with Sony is they probably had this outlook. We know they had the Sinister Six stuff all planned. I think they went into this set of movies thing, and this is going to be our tentpole. We're going to go through 5, 6, 7 movies where we're going to build this all out, and you'll have this interweaving massive story. And they're just, because they didn't get there, because they stopped after 2, you just don't get anything of that, and it just feels like this such a rush job. Although the film's long, it feels it's a slow movie, but it's a rushed movie at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's what's broken. And one thing I noticed is that Spider-Man 1 is a 10 minutes for the bite. I think it's 10 minutes into the film, he's bitten by the spider. This one's getting an hour. And the pacing's so wrong. And then you're rushing the villain, you're rushing secondary subplots, then they're setting up new subplots. And I guess we finally have to talk about arguably, I don't want to say this is the worst thing in the world. It maybe epitomizes where these films went wrong. And it's basically the opening scene. Oscorp equals the Illuminati. The most ridiculous subplot in cinema history is that Oscorp, I mean, we know there are terrible big companies out there, do not get me wrong. It's very real. But Oscorp are the real villains. And I know this stems into the second one, but it's really hard to dissect at the end of the second film that they have a ready-made Sinister Six in the basement of the building. And, it does make this look worse, but it's like, okay, what didn't we do in the first one? We didn't ever show his mom or dad. You got a passing line, oh, I live with my aunt and uncle. Decipher that however you want. It's not an important detail. The detail is he doesn't have his parents. He has his aunt and uncle. We don't know if they dropped him off and ran away. We don't know if they died. We'll never know. We don't care. In this, a whole conspiracy theory about Richard Parker's work, about Oscorp, about what he was working on, to the fact that Rhys Ifans' Kurt Connor was his lab partner, coincidentally. All this ridiculous stuff. And then the fact that he was best friends with bloody Harry Osborn in the next one, which is going to come into it. This is where I think Sony fully missed the film. Making Oscorp the big villains. This huge thing. I forgot the actor's name, the one that passed away, who was in this. He disappears out of the film. As soon as you get to the bridge sequence, he's the one that says, we're going to start human trials at the. Of course, it's at the the military place where they're all lost their arms and legs. Of course, he was going to do it there, but the whole pharmaceutical big battle, I think, is completely terrible. And also, I really hate the fact that the whole Spider-Man origin is in this part as well. He just strayed into the wrong room, and there's hundreds and hundreds of spiders as well. Not a one and bit and done. There's
Yeah.
hundreds of maybe there's hundreds of Spider-Man. Maybe this was going to be the Spider-Verse. Who knows?
It's bizarre the way they've done it because they have this whole Norman Osborn subplot where they will not show you who Norman Osborn is because obviously he has not been cast by the time they did this movie. Even where there's a bit where he's traveling up the elevator of Oscorp and they have this is Norman Osborn and he's completely in shadow, so you can't see him on that video screen. So it's like we don't know who's going to play him in any point, so we can get anybody we like, so we'll hide him. No, Harry in this makes no sense to the second movie. It just doesn't. I don't. That's yes, Oscorp is run by Norman Osborn, but you don't need to go. If they're starting this as the origin story, that is not where Oscorp probably are at that point to like,
Yeah.
especially not a dying Norman Osborn. Like you want him to have the Green Goblin role. You don't want to jump straight to Harry in the next movie, which they then had to because they mentioned they kind of hint towards the Green Goblin stuff that's his dad had, but it's just kind of skipped over. And you have to have Norman Osborn as Green Goblin to get to Harry. It doesn't make sense without that. And yeah, I just think they didn't quite have what they wanted, so they just thought, well, we'll have the subplot, but we don't have to flesh that out at all. To be honest, they couldn't have added that in as well. This movie it would have run 3 hours.
Yeah, it's so bonkers. Right? Hiding him as well. I don't want to be weird and say it's cowardice, but we didn't get J. Jonah Jameson, and in the second film we get him as an email attachment. Like we haven't cast him, but theirs was I think we're too scared to cast him. I think when the second one hit and we got was it Chris Cooper that played Norman or someone like
Yes.
that. Everyone still thought Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin. Like Willem Dafoe was Norman Osborn. Like I don't think he had not an impact on it. Obviously, he had a tremendous impact at the time, but I don't think that casting was as sort of not iconic. I don't think it was as ingrained into the world as it was maybe a couple of years later. That I think because it had only been 10 years still. Obviously, he had its fans, and obviously Willem Dafoe's an incredible actor. But I don't think it was sort of sealed. Whereas now, not just because of No Way Home, I think because Willem Dafoe's had a bit of a career renaissance the last 6-7 years with Oscar nominations and indies, and I think out of the generation that grew up with that Spider-Man film have all even been more vocal of his career. I think that's locked it in, and it kind of doomed the second film, and also it's a subplot that no one cares about. How can you care about Norman Osborn dying? It's not a character you've been introduced to, as you said. It's just a name. If you didn't know Spider-Man comics, if you didn't know the Green Goblin, that just sounds like a man is dying, and it kind of cheapens Kurt Connors that the motive is just for him to save the Green Goblin now. And obviously, where it backfires in the next film is even worse. But it's a setup which has not just no payoff. I think was there that photo of his head was going to be in a cryo freezing box or something stupid at the end of the second film, and all that ridiculous stuff. And I just think they just missed the point entirely of what these films are about, making Oscorp a conspiracy theorist villain organization. I don't even think it's them trying to like copy the MCU. It was it them trying to be smart? Like, haha, they're gonna love this conspiracy thriller. And no one did. They just wanted to see Spider-Man swinging around New York.
Again, I think it's just because they've wanted to plan so far ahead for so many movies that they thought we're going to get all these little plot points in. To never get there just robs you of kind of that story point where they're like, we didn't get started because we weren't going to tell it yet, and you just kind of think, well, never got to, and now the movie is lessened because of it.
Yeah, exactly. And it is a win, and I know the credit scene as well is when it's got like the shadowy figure visiting. I remember at the time everyone thought, is that Norman Osborn? Is it Electro because there's lightning and all these things? And it was just the guy that was also in the next credit scene. Without getting time, I always forget that name. I think he's the one that was involved with the Brandon Lee stuff on The Crow, and it's not like it's Sam Jackson popping up. And they went for the whole let's cover this guy's face too. And like do you know who he's meant to be? Is he just a dude,
Mm.
or is he a character we're meant to know and you're going to hide his face? And again, even things like that were really weird from Sony. Like, and it just made you realize, okay, Lizard is alive at the end of the film, but there's no one cares. No one cares about Norman again. It just, I remember. I mean, it's a better credit than the next one because the next one's advertising an X-Men film, which is even more ridiculous. But it's just a really like stump way to leave this film, and going back to 2012, the gap to Amazing Man. I don't remember any hype traction between the films. It's just the trailer came out and there was a set photos, and the Avengers came out, so
Yeah.
everyone cared about the Avengers films, and Dana Rises, and things are moving on. And I just think before we head into final thoughts, do you have any favorite scenes? Because it's been a bit negative to this, so we can maybe try and spice it up. I'm gonna
Yeah.
say saving the kids. It's a bit cheesy, but it's him being Spider-Man and saving people, even though it's like the middle of the night on New York Bridge in the pitch black again, and the car just happens to set on fire too. I liked the scene of him saving people, and that's what you want from a Spider-Man film, and
Yeah.
we don't get an awful lot of it in truth.
I mean, yeah, I do. Yeah, again, this review has come off really negative in the way we've probably talked about it, but that's not the way I feel about it. It's not a film I would go, I hate this movie and I would never ever watch it again. There are moments in this movie that work really well for me. I say Garfield works as my Spider-Man. I think he plays really well. When it comes to favorite scenes, I think that one is up there because I do love the throwing down of the mask to make the kid. You'll feel really strong when you put this mask on. Just like he's playing it off as like, this is how I feel as Spider-Man. You can now feel that. And I guess the other one is probably when we get to see him finally swing through New York with the cranes. When they all line up for him so he can get to where he needs to go through New York, and he finally does that big jump and starts the swing. And I quite like that towards the end as well. I think there's a lot, as much as we haven't, there are things to like in this movie. I just don't think they are well put together as a movie. I just think there are glimpses and there are moments, but not as an overall. But yeah, there are scenes I really like, and I think Garfield, anytime he's as Spider-Man and is actually speaking, are probably up there with my favorite scenes.
No, I think it's a really good thing. Because like I said, there are some good scenes. We've been harsh on it, and I think it's down to I think we probably like this a lot more the last time we saw it than we did now. But at the same time, it is revisiting it to seeing what comes next. And I guess it is worth mentioning that the next film they change a lot of this. They change the costume, they change the color palette, they change a lot of things. Whether some work or some don't work, that will obviously be a discussion for Sunday. But other favorite scenes I'm trying to think of. I mean, I want to say I like the Lizard's origin, but I don't because we don't get it. We just get his arm turning green, and then it's a car, and yeah, not to bore with Raimi, but I'm just like, could you imagine a Sam Raimi Lizard origin that would get this like horror American Werewolf in London type thing, and we just got broken taxi door, and I think there's some real missed opportunities where I think this one could have been good. And the favorite scenes, I really like the dinner scene. I know you weren't a massive. I hate that the bit on the roof after, but the whole like, I mean, not to talk real life politics, but someone calling out the cops in 2012 looks a hell of a lot more real in 2021. But it's like, what about things the police can't do? Can't, and it's like in Curb Enthusiasm, music should go over the top. No, it's a tricky one because I don't think there's many great scenes. And I don't mean that sound really negative, and people that do, please comment them. But I just think it's a very consistent film. Whether that's a good,
it's
or
more frustrating than bad. I think that's more it. I was more frustrated watching it. Like, just get to the next point. Do what I need you to do for a Spider-Man movie to move along. And I was just get to the point like, I need you to get somewhere. Like, say that first hour I found really painful getting through to kind of get through the rest of the movie. I just need that. I know what's coming and I know it has to happen. Get to it now so we can get into your main bulk of story. So yeah, more frustrating watch than an unhappy watch.
Yeah, no, that's a really good way to do it. Because what I would say to people, like wrapping in final thoughts, obviously we were beyond praise on the first three, and even talking about the ins and outs. But with this one, I guess this is maybe curious viewing for if you haven't seen this and you're going through them for the new film. Of course, watch this, but I genuinely think I'm gonna maybe come out of the next film and have a 180 inch that I used to say Amazing Spider-Man's all right, and I think now it's going to be, is the Amazing Spider-Man 2 the all right one? I'm kind of scared to make that prediction live. But at the same time, it does make me think that a lot of problems with this film, again, the color palette, the nighttime stuff, they started fixing all that, and we haven't even spoken about the score. The score is just non-existent. It's probably a polite term.
Yeah.
And the next one, they go and get Zimmer, and it's maybe not the best Spider-Man theme, but their score is memorable. The villains have their own stuff and all that kind of thing. So with this film, I think this film is. I think it's a half-baked idea. I think they're onto something and missed the concept of it. They missed the beat of it. They maybe rushed it too quick. They were so focused on getting a Spider-Man film out to the market that they sacrificed any actual creativity within it. But I do think they cast roles solidly and they set up enough things not to get a payoff, but there were things set up at least for you to follow in the next film. I don't know. I think you said it
No,
best, that it's a frustrating film.
Yeah, that would literally be my fan. That it literally is. It's a frustrating movie that I wanted to. And it's a Spider-Man movie. This is built into me. This is something I want to like. It's not that I want to go at these movies and go, oh, a Marvel movie. That's my jam. There's people who love all their art movies and things like that. I'm down for a movie that I can shove popcorn in my face and have a really great time with. And I just, for the want of wanting to like this, I couldn't get there with it.
No, that's exactly in. And maybe, a week today, the time scales up, maybe this will classify as a film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's the big question I've got moving forward to people now. If Tobey and Andrew are in No Way Home, do they qualify as MCU films? Will I be watching 1, 2, and 3 before Iron Man 1? 100% yes, if they do turn up. So we want to hear from people at home. So we may have been harsh on this, and that's not been our intention. But let us know your thoughts. Again, is this your Spider-Man? I think what amazes me with Spider-Man, I think I said about Batman now, the characters are evolving across pop culture where everyone seems to have their own, whether it's an age, films, whatever. I think some comic films are now reaching the Bond level of iconography, and it's really fascinating. Any Toby stands, not Toby, Andrew, do comment your thoughts. Anything you disagree with, let us know. We reply to comments. We're also really curious to hear your thoughts on them as well, because we know that I think these have had a bit of a resurgence, but maybe more so the sequel. And that being said, this Sunday, the 12th of December, is going to be the review for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's going to be a very interesting discussion, and I kind of can't leave it as a No Way Home preview because it's not, but we do have a playlist on the channel, The Journey to No Way Home. It's got the reviews for Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, our reaction to the new trailer. We've changed the thumbnails on the videos earlier this year, the 2 Tom Holland films, if you're curious for thoughts on them. It's not orientated around the new film, but it does enough of a job personally. So do check them out if you are fans of Spider-Man. And I've got Dave, your info come on the screen, your Twitter and YouTube. Where can people find you, and what are you up to for this? Because are you building your own electronic webs yet, made out of Oscorp wires?
I've actually, yes, I was at Oscorp this morning and just happened to be building web shooters now with this string stuff. It's amazing. But yeah, currently on my YouTube channel, you can find me. I'm currently in the midst of finishing off. Yes, it's finished behind me, but my channel itself, the videos are still about 30 issues from being complete. So building the Terminator. Then I'll be going back to Ecto 1. I probably will have, I've done for Ghostbusters, just like an immediate coming out the cinema, more of a feeling video, like not like a story points or things like that. Will just be an immediate coming out and saying this is what I thought of the movie, because I can't wait to see Spider-Man on the 15th. I'm very, very excited for it. But yeah, so coming up with my channel, you can find me on Twitter. I don't post very often, but when I do, it's amazing stuff. Always, you can find me at the Dave Bryan at Twitter as well.
Definitely. So everyone do follow him on there. There's great stuff out there. A lot of good videos as well. And we're going to have our social up as well now. Twitter at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinema savvy. We log all our films on there. You can find us what videos are coming out, what's coming live. And other videos coming up on the channel. It's it's Spider-Man at the moment. There's obviously Lord of the Rings things happening as well. December is the 20th anniversary of Lord of the Rings. So at the time this video goes up, there will be a review on the animated Lord of the Rings film. Apologies, I don't know the terms and names. As you can tell, I'm not really a Lord of the Rings knowledge person, so I'm not going to say it wrong for Chris's sake. But do check that on the channel. And there are new reviews coming out. Follow us on social media to find out which ones, because there's so many happening right now. We don't actually know. What can we see? And who knows? There is another Andrew Garfield film that's Andrew Garfield that's just come out that I have not seen yet. So maybe I should get that done between both Amazing Spider-Mans. That would actually probably work pretty well. But as always, I want to thank everybody for watching today. Dave for joining me as well. It's been an absolute blast talking this film, and I cannot wait to see you on the next one. So everybody, thanks for watching. We're sure to see you then.